What's up guys, MizzoFrizzo from Pitchfork Academy here, and in this Unreal Engine 5 tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to use gameplay tags as well as my limb damage system in order to change the movement mode of a character class. So as you can see here, I've got these two AIs wandering around the map, and if I shoot one in the leg, if I can actually hit them, it is going to change their movement mode to injured, which as you can see here has its own animations as well as max walk speed and braking deceleration. So this character is now in the movement mode injured. And if I shoot one of these guys in the head, I'll wait until he's actually walking around. And then if I can shoot him in the head while he's walking, it's going to trigger the movement mode stunned, which as you can see here has a max walk speed of 0. He can't actually move now. He's sort of staggered or stunned. And this is all done using gameplay tags. So you don't have to do this with line traces. You could do this with different melee weapons using, for example, the gameplay ability system. But this is just the way that I've set this up in order to demonstrate it in this tutorial. But just before we get started, guys, if you like what we do here at Pitchfork Academy, the #1 way to support our channel is by checking out our new game, Skyblocker, which we've just released on Steam. It's a 3D arcade puzzle game where you stack blocks as high as you can to try and get a high score while battling the elements and gravity. But without further ado, let me show you how to do this. Alrighty guys, now before we get started, it's very important that you've followed along with my gameplay tags tutorial as well as my limb damage system tutorial, because this will be built off of the back of those. So I'm here in my project here and I've got this blueprints folder which has my gameplay tags actor component as well as the blueprint function library that contains my gameplay tag functions and my interface. We won't be using the interface in this tutorial, but you will need to have followed along with that gameplay tags tutorial as well as my limb damage system tutorial. So down here in third person and blueprints, I've got this components folder, and this has my health system actor component, which has been added to my master character class, of which I have two children, the BP player and the BP enemy. So we will be playing as the player, and we'll be adding some basic AI functionality to the enemy to test out our movement modes functionality. So with all that being said, I'm going to head to my blueprints folder right here. I'm going to add a few more folders. We'll create one and we'll call it enumerations. We'll create another one and we'll call this one data tables. Whoops, no spaces. And we will also need one for our structures. So create a third one and call it structures. And we'll head into the enumerations folder first and right click, and under blueprint you can find enumeration, and we'll call this enum underscore movement modes and open this up. We're going to add 5 enumerators to this enumeration. We'll call the first one none, and then let's have walking, sprinting. We'll create one called stunned, and lastly injured. And it's very important that you remember exactly what you called these. We'll keep this open for reference, but basically I named these in the present tense. So walking, sprinting, stunned, and injured, with that first letter being capitalized. So it's very important that we spell these the same and we're consistent throughout here. We can save this one, and then we can head into our structures folder, and we'll right click here, we'll create a new blueprint structure, and we'll call this S underscore movement mode. Open up S movement mode, and we'll add our first variable, which will be just called movement mode. And this will be the enumeration that we just created. So search for enum movement modes and add this. There is an E movement modes that comes in the engine. We're not using that. We're using this one, which is why I like to call my enumerations enum underscore, because the Epic naming convention is E underscore, and they already have some enumerations in here, and we do not want to be confused with them. We'll add another variable. We'll call this one gameplay tag. Whoops. Gameplay tag. And this will be a gameplay tag. And we'll also add max speed. This will be the max movement speed of the movement mode. This can be a float. Add another float, and we'll call this one braking deceleration. Deceleration, spelt that correctly. And this is basically how fast your character will slow down when, slowing down or stopping in that movement mode, how fast they will brake. And we'll add one more and call it can move ? And this will be of type Boolean, and this is just whether the character should be able to move while they're in that movement mode. That's all we need to do in here. We can save this, and then we're going to head to our data tables folder. So if you haven't seen data tables before, they're a pretty great way to store, a whole bunch of data that you want to pull in your blueprints, but data that you don't really want to change at runtime. So that's what data tables are good for. So this is a good example and a good introduction to them. If you haven't used them before, they're under miscellaneous and data table. And straight away it will ask you to pick a row structure. We can find our struct, which is S movement mode. Select S movement mode and hit OK. And we'll call this DT for data table underscore movement modes, and open this up. And you'll see here we've got these columns based on our structure that we created. And I'll just expand these, and then we'll add 4 rows for our 4 different movement modes. And basically we want to rename these row names the same as our movement mode enumeration, which is the first variable on the structure here. So we'll do walking first, and then we'll rename this exactly the same, walking. And then we can set a few figures in here in the structure right here. So we've got the movement mode, which is the enumeration. So we'll select that. And then the gameplay tags we'll need to create in our gameplay tag container, which is in our actor component. So here in our blueprints folder, we've got our actor component gameplay tags. We can open this up, and the gameplay tags container right here, we can select this and drop this down, and we're going to add a few movement modes here. So I've already got this test one that I added when prototyping, but if you need to remove any gameplay tags, which I will remove this one just so that we're starting from scratch, you can click manage gameplay tags, and then right here you can delete that tag like so. So we're starting from scratch here, and I will add under the source default gameplay tags.ini. So you want to add them to this default ini. We will add movement dot, and I will control C this because I don't want to type it a bunch of times. We'll add movement dot walking and add new tag, and then this will create this new section here, movement, with walking underneath it. We'll add movement dot sprinting, add new tag, movement dot stunned, and movement dot injured. And we'll also add movement dot can move and add that tag. Nice. So we've got our 4 different movement modes and 1 for can move as well. And that's all we need to do in here. Because this actor component is added to our master character class, all of our character classes that are children of that master character class will have this gameplay tags container in there and all of this functionality as well. So we'll go back to our data table now, and under gameplay tag for walking, we'll drop this down, and we'll select the walking gameplay tag. So that's the gameplay tag that corresponds with that movement mode. We'll add a max speed in here of something like 300, which is about half the default. And we'll add a braking deceleration of 2000, which I believe is the default. And we'll check can move as well. So we'll move down the list here. We'll select the second one. We'll change this to sprinting. And then we'll press F2 to rename and call this one sprinting to make sure we spell that correctly. And we'll set the defaults here. So we'll change the tag to sprinting. And let's make this the default move speed, which is 600. And we'll give this a braking deceleration a little bit lower than default, 1500, something like that. And we'll check this can move. And moving on down the list, let's do stunned next and rename this one to stunned. The gameplay tag is stunned. And we'll leave the max speed at 0. We will actually use this as an example of a movement mode where you cannot move. So we'll put the max speed to 0. We'll put the braking deceleration a little bit higher than default, so 2200. And we will leave can move as false. And last but not least, we will do injured, F2. Rename this as injured. Set the gameplay tag, injured. And let's make this a speed of about 130. And we'll make, again, the braking deceleration a little bit higher than default, 2200. And we'll check can move to be true. So nice. You can see all the data here in the data table filled out. And then basically you can pull this data from the data table with just the row name, which is super, super handy for what we're doing today. Next, we'll move over to our master character class, and we'll start implementing the logic for our movement modes in here. So we're going to need a couple of variables. I'll add one and call it current movement mode. And this will be the enum movement modes that we created. And I'll also add one, actually I'll duplicate this one and I'll call this one current movement mode. Whoops, that's a rename. Control D to duplicate. Current movement mode struct. And this will be the S movement mode that we created. Nice. I'll compile this and I'll actually set a default current movement mode as sprinting, and the current movement mode struct, this will actually be set at runtime. So we won't put any defaults in here. Let's just, we'll call this function on event begin play once we've created it. We'll call this function that will set the default current move mode. So let's go ahead and create a function and we'll call it set current movement mode. And this will need one input, and the input will be movement mode, and this will be the enumeration enum movement modes. Nice. So when we call this function, we'll pass through the movement mode that we want to set. And the first thing we'll want to do in here is clear all of the movement gameplay tags, because we'll clear them all and then we'll set them, to whatever we want them to be. So we can grab our AC gameplay tags from the components right here, and we will remove gameplay tags. Now, we do not need to use these ones under the blueprint interface, because these are when we sort of hit another character and we needed to interface with them. But because we have the gameplay tags right here in the components, and we're doing this on the character that contains the gameplay tags actor component, we can just call the function. So we'll just call function remove gameplay tags, and then here what we want to do is just drop this down, and under movement select all of the gameplay tags under movement, and we're going to remove all of these. And that's where these functions we created in the gameplay tags tutorial come very much in handy, because there's nothing in the engine that does this by default. We had to create this function, and just like that, we can remove all of these tags from this character. The next thing we want to do is get data table row under utilities here, get data table row, and the data table we want to pull from is our dt underscore movement modes, and the row name we can get from the enumeration here, but you cannot just convert this to a name, enum to name. This does not work for some reason. I believe it's a bug. This has not been fixed. Epic Games, get your priorities straight. What we can actually do here is convert this to a string, enum to string, and then if we do to name from string, this will actually work. This is basically what they just need to put inside of the enum to name, but they haven't done it. In fact, what you could do is highlight these two nodes and collapse this to a function, and you could call it enum to name custom, just so there's no naming conflict. And then you could check pure, and presto, you've got an enum to name in engine, like so. Nice. Epic Games, get your shit together, make this for us, so we don't have to do it ourselves. That's why we use Unreal Engine. Let's next set the current movement mode struct based on the row that is found from this data table, like so. And then we can just right click on this pin and split the struct pin, and we have access to all of the data from the row in our data table that corresponds with the movement mode that we've passed through. Very, very nice. Now we can set some stuff in our character based on this data that we've pulled. First, I'm going to drag off of here and press S to get a sequence, and I'm going to add until we've got 5 pins here. And the first thing I'll do is set the current movement mode off of the movement mode in that struct. And now the current movement mode has been set in our character based on, whatever we've set our movement mode to. We can also grab our AC gameplay tags here, and we can add gameplay tags. Once again, under call function, add gameplay tags. And off of gameplay tag here, we can make gameplay tag container from tag, and this will allow us to plug this in here. Nice. Plug that into then one. So we'll add all of the gameplay tags that are relevant for that movement mode. And then let's set some stuff in our character movement. So we'll grab our character movement, and we can set max walk speed. We'll set the max walk speed as the max speed. And let's also set braking deceleration for our walking movement mode. So this isn't just walking, by the way. This is basically just the movement mode when you're on the ground and you're, walking, running, prone, whatever. This is the movement mode that is default for your character movement component. So we'll set braking deceleration for walking, plug that into then 3, and plug in braking deceleration. And then lastly, we'll drag off of can move here and press B to get a branch. We'll plug that into then 4, and then we'll copy this AC gameplay tags and add gameplay tags node up here and plug it into the true. And we will add the can move gameplay tag to the character. If this movement mode has can move to be true, then we'll add can move. And there's no need to remove can move because we already removed it here when we call the function. We remove all the tags, and then over here we're basically adding all of the tags that we want to be in that movement mode. But what we can do off of false here is grab our character movement once again, and we'll find a node called stop movement immediately. And this means that if they enter a movement mode where they cannot move, it will stop them from continuing to move a little bit, even though their max walk speed is set to 0. They might be moving a little bit, so we'll stop movement immediately. Nice. And the only other thing we could really add in here is off of current movement mode here, you could get a switch on enum movement modes, and then this would allow you to add any functionality to these movement modes that you wanted. If you wanted some more sort of custom functionality, you could run that off of here, but we're not going to do that today. We're just going to sort of test the bare basics of this system. And now that this function is all set up, let's go to our event graph, and I've got some events on begin play up here. I will just call my set current movement mode on begin play, and I will set it to sprinting. Yeah, because that's got the default max walk speed on our character movement component. Actually, what I could do to test this out very quickly is set it to walking by default, and then if I hit play, I'll only have the max speed of the walking movement mode. And then what I could do is find a press of the left shift, and I'll call this when I press the left shift and change it to sprinting, and on released, change it back to walking. And just like that, I've got walking, and left shift, I'm sprinting, and if I release it, I'm walking again. Nice. But we're going to do something a little bit cooler than that. We're going to basically set these movement modes on an enemy so that when we shoot them in the head, they're stunned, and when we shoot them in the leg, they are injured, and you'll be able to see these movement modes in action. So we're going to do this on our BP enemy, which I'll drag out in the level here. And just to double check that this is a BP player, I'll drag that out as well, so that is there. But we're going to test this on the BP enemy. And we're going to animate this. This is not going to be an in-depth animation tutorial, but I will grab some animations from Mixamo to add to our project here so that we can see these movement modes in action. So if you're not familiar with Mixamo, it's got a bunch of essentially stylized characters and also a massive library of animations that are free to use in your projects. So if you haven't already, create an account and log in. It's totally free to use. And we'll head over to the animations tab here and search for injured. And the two animations that we're looking for here are injured walk and injured idle. So we'll start with injured idle. We'll select injured idle, and we will firstly just increase the arm space on this character because my character's holding a weapon, and also this will clash with the thighs of our mannequin. So I'm just going to crank the arm space up to 60, and that'll bring the hands out a little bit. And then I'm going to hit download, and I'm going to download this with a skin. Keyframe reduction to uniform, 30 frames per second and FBX are absolutely fine, so I'll hit download. And once that has downloaded, I'll head on over to my injured walk right here. And the first thing I want to do here is check in place because we don't want root motion on this animation. We want this animation to be walking in place like so. And the character arm space at 50 is fine. I'll hit download. Without skin, uniform keyframe reduction, 30 frames per second and FBX, and hit download. And then back in my project, I have this folder enum starter pack where I've added a bunch of these animations by Epic Games from Fab, the enum starter pack, just to give myself, some basic pistol animations, which I've polished a little bit so that I can make my character hold a gun. But don't worry too much about that. Once again, this is not really an animation tutorial, but nevertheless, in this enum starter pack folder, I'm going to right click and create a new folder. I'll call it Mixamo, just so I have somewhere to put my Mixamo animations. and I'll navigate to the folder where I downloaded these two assets off of Mixamo. The injured idle is the one with the skin, so we'll drag that in first, and then you'll get this dialog box. We'll leave all of this as default and hit import, and then you'll see we've got our skeletal mesh, our animation sequence, a physics asset and the skeleton, and a couple of materials that imported for the character. Very, very good. We'll also drag in our injured walk, and once again, leave all of this as default and hit import. And then we've got our two animation sequences right here. So we can use this to sort of visualize our movement modes. But first we need to retarget these onto our mannequin. So I'll right click either of these animation sequences and hit retarget animations. And I'll make sure auto generate retargeter is checked. I'll select the target skeletal mesh as many, SKM many, and I'm actually going to use the walk animation to generate a retargeter. So if we double click this, you can see it looks like our animation is retargeting okay, but I happen to know there's some problems with the feet here. So instead of exporting these animations, I'm actually going to export the retarget assets, and this will basically just export the retargeter to the Mixamo folder here. I'll hit export, and then you'll see we've got this IK retargeter along with a couple of IK rigs for our source and our target skeletal meshes. But we'll open up this IK retargeter, and like I said, there's a bit of a problem with the feet here. The feet of the Mixamo skeleton is a little bit elevated and it throws off the retargeter. I'm not going to go in depth into making these animations look great, but if we just go up here where it says running retarget and change this to edit retarget pose, we can then select the target here and the pelvis, and then we've got a relative offset of the pelvis right here, and we can drop it down on the z-axis so our feet are a little bit lower. And if I click this again so it's running the retarget, you'll see it's still not great. The feet have some weird angular stuff going on, but you know, we'll at least drop this pelvis down a little bit so that it's a little bit closer. Can even drop it a little bit more so the heel is touching. And then we can save this and close this, and we'll right click one of these animation sequences again and retarget animations, and this time we'll uncheck auto generate retargeter, and we'll select the auto generated retargeter that we just edited. We'll use that to retarget both of these animations. Hit export, select my Mixamo folder and hit export and export. And then we've got these two animations retargeted onto our many. But just before we use these, I might open these up and see if I can fix them a little bit more. So his foot's off the ground there and his base foot is sort of going through the ground. I'm going to pause this animation, take it back to the first frame, and then let's play around with the feet a little bit. Not going to spend too much time on this, but if I find foot R, change this to world space, and my angle snapping to 5 degrees. I'll bring this up a little bit, and I'll just try and level his foot out a little bit so it's on the ground, and then keyframe that. And I might play with his left leg a little bit as well and see if we can get that down to the ground. So thigh left, bring this down and keyframe it. Calf left, bring this forward and keyframe it. And let's hit play now and have a look at how that looks. Oh, his calf looks like it's it looks like his knee is broken. So I might just bring this out like that and keyframe that, and then I'll play with the left foot, bring that down, angle it a little bit, and I'll keyframe it like that. And it's not going to look great, but at least his feet are on the ground. Sort of. I'm going to bring that left foot down another 5 degrees, and even though it's going into the ground, yeah, that's fine. And I'm going to take a quick look at injured walk as well. Let's have a look at this animation. Yeah, pretty much the same issues with the feet here, and this is a very hacky way of making it look a little bit better. But once again, I'll find the right foot, and I'll bring it up, and angle it this way, keyframe that, and I'll do the same as I did with the idle animation with the left thigh. Bring that down, keyframe it, bring the calf forward and maybe out a little bit so it doesn't look broken. And the left foot, I'll bring that down in, rotate it like this a little bit. Yeah, it doesn't look great. But once again, yeah, his feet are more or less on the ground now. That'll be fine. Let's move on. So basically what we want to do is use our limb damage system to set this current movement mode when we shoot our enemy. So walking by default on begin play, that's good because our enemy is going to move around the map, and if they're running, it might be a bit hard to hit them. But let's go into our BP enemy now in third person and blueprints, BP enemy, and open this up. Open full blueprint editor. And what we might do firstly is just make a little bit of code that makes this enemy sort of wander around our map. And actually, just before we do that, I'm going to go to my master character class, and I'm going to create a function that checks this can move boolean in our current movement mode to see if we can actually move around the map. So what we can do is drag out our movement input section here, and I'll grab all of this and move it out. And I'll grab our gameplay tags component, and I'll check has gameplay tag, has active gameplay tag under call function, and I'll check if we have the can move gameplay tag. I'll also check for exact match, and then I'm going to right click this and collapse to function, and I'll call it check can move, and I'll make this pure. And then oh, this needs an output, so we'll open this up and we'll add a return node, plug in the has active tag, and we'll just rename this output to can move, like so. And then we've got this pure function that returns can move. We can drag off of here and press B to get a branch. And just like that, we've added a check whether we can actually move to check if we can move our character with these movement inputs. We can Control D and duplicate this down here, and we'll add this in front of our jump, so we can also not jump if we can't move. Nice. And now if we head to our BP enemy, we will have that pure function. So we can create a custom event here, and let's just call it roam at random. And we'll check can move, drag off of here and press B to get a branch. And we'll only do this if our enemy can actually move. We can drag off of the true here and get an AI move to. The pawn, we can get a reference to self. And the destination here, we can find a node called get random reachable point in radius. So our AI is just going to wander randomly around the map. The origin, we can get actor location. And the radius will set to something like 20,000 or 2,000, which is about 20 meters. And everything else we can leave as is, except we'll change the acceptance radius to something like 50 units, just so that it usually succeeds. It should be able to reach within that acceptance radius. And then we will, on success, add a delay of 2.5 seconds, and we'll do it on fail as well. And then after 2.5 seconds of waiting, we will then call the roam at random once more. So they'll roam to a random point, they'll stay there for 2.5 seconds, and then they'll roam to another random point. And we'll call that on begin play roam at random, like so. And the only other thing we need to make this work is a nav mesh bounds on our level. So I'll click the cube plus icon up here and search for nav, and we'll add a nav mesh bounds volume to our level. I'll press R to get the scaling gizmo, and I'll scale this up on the X and the Y until it covers my whole level. And I'll also scale it up on the Z axis and move it up a little bit. And then to check this, we can press P, and all of these green areas is where our AI will be able to move to. Press P again to get rid of that preview. And if I hit play now, my enemy is now walking around the map to random points in the map. Nice. And we'll now set up the functionality so that when we shoot this enemy, it can go into different movement modes, such as stunned and injured. And that's very, very easy to do because in our blueprints folder, in our third person blueprints and components folder, we have our health system from the other tutorial. And if I open this up and I find event limb damage, we've got a switch in here which then executes different functionality depending on which limb has been damaged and below a certain threshold right here. So I'll use this. I'll get rid of the on def here, and I'll put the remaining limb health of the head. Actually, the head is a bad example because we made it do 100 damage to the head right away. So I'll just remove this altogether, and then on the head here we can call, the set movement mode that we created. But first we just need a reference to the owning character of this health component. So we can go to the event graph, and on event begin play here we will get owner, and then we can use this as an object to cast to our master character class. We'll run this on event begin play, and we'll promote this to a variable, and we'll call it owning character. And so now we have a reference to the BP master character class. We can call any functions inside of that. So again, in event limb damage, on the head here, we can get our owning character, and we can set, I believe we called it set current movement mode. Set current movement mode. And we can select stunned here. And if we hit the left leg or the right leg, we can set it to injured. And this will set that enumeration in that character. So current movement mode, the enumeration here that we set in our set current movement mode. So the first thing we do here is set this enumeration. We can use this enumeration to blend between different animations in our animation blueprint. So if we head to our master character class here and select the mesh, over here we can see the anim class is ABP many, and we can browse to that. We've got ABP many and ABP Quinn, but even if one of your characters is using ABP Quinn, it is a child of ABP many. So we'll make all of our changes in ABP many, and they will be reflected on ABP Quinn. So actually what I might do is open my BP enemy, select the mesh, and I'll change the animation blueprint here to ABP Quinn. And now this will be Quinn's version of the animation blueprint. And I'll change this to SKM Quinn as well so that we can see that difference there. So we've got our player and our enemy, but we'll make all of our changes in ABP many. So I'll open this up, and basically all I've got here is a spine rotation mechanic, and I'm blending a pistol idle onto the upper body of my character. And if you want to know how to do this stuff, I have plenty of tutorials on the subject that will allow your spine to rotate depending on whether you're looking up and down, and how to blend the locomotion animations onto the lower body and a weapon animation onto the upper body, for example. So I have plenty of tutorials on those subjects, but basically all I'll be doing here is doing a switch, a blend, and I will blend in different animations depending on the movement mode. So in locomotion here, I've got my idle and my walk run, and this is just straight from the third person template. But in here, I've got my idle animation, and then in walk run, I've got this blend space for walk run. And basically what we want to do here is blend a different blend space in if we're injured or what have you. But we do need a blend space to actually blend to. So if I select this walk run here, down here I've got the blend space and I can browse to it. I've got the blend space for the male walk run from the third person template. I'm going to duplicate this and I'm going to call this one blend space MM injured. I'll open this up and I'll delete all of these animations from the blend space 1D down here, so we've got no animations. And in the asset details under horizontal axis, I'm going to change the maximum axis value to the maximum walk speed of our injured movement mode, which is 130. And then I'm going to find my injured animations. I'll grab my injured idle anim and drag it over here at speed 0. I'll grab my injured walk and drag it in over here at the max speed of 130. And then if I hold control and I hover the cursor over here, you'll see that this is the animation that will play at speed 130. And if we slow down to a stop, it will play this one. Very nice. And it's easy. It's as easy as that. We now have this blend space for our injured movement mode. We can save this and close this. And then in our animation blueprint here, I'm just going to duplicate this one, plug the ground speed in, and then with this other one selected, I'll go down to the actual blend space here that it is using, and I'll change it for my MM injured, like so. I actually need to access my enumeration from my character. Sorry about this, guys. It's been a long day, but if we go to the event graph here, basically I've just added this pitch rotation stuff for the spine rotation for looking up and down. But what I need to do is replace this reference here with a direct reference to my master character class so that I can pull this current movement mode from my character and basically make use of it in my animation blueprint. So here I'm just going to delete this cast and instead cast to my master character class. Plug this in here and plug in the execution pins and the data pins, and then select this variable, set variable node, and change the variable type to an object reference to my master character class. Change variable type, and now this will be a direct reference to my master character class, so I'll be able to pull anything from that character class, such as the movement mode. And I'm just going to add this to the end here. You can literally add it to anywhere. You could add a new pin to the sequence and add it there. But I am just going to grab my character reference and get current movement mode. Promote this to a variable. I'll just call it current movement mode. Plug it in here. And now we have this variable in our animation blueprint, which is based off of the current movement mode in my character. So we can now use this to blend our animations. Once again, sorry about that, guys. It's been a long day, but if I head back to my enum graph here, I should now be able to blend poses by enum. If I just search enum movement mode, here we go, blend poses enum movement modes. And we'll grab our current movement mode, plug it into the active enum value, and then if we right click here, you'll see we've got add pin for element, and these are all the elements of our enumeration. We can add walking, add sprinting, add stunned, and add injured. and I'll plug my injured into my injured pose like so. And for all of these other modes, I'll actually just duplicate this walk run blend space, and I'll use it for all of the other, just in case it goes searching for these other movement modes and it doesn't find something in there. This way it will find something. Oh, I don't need to plug that into the result like so. Nice. And basically this node is how you will blend different animations for different movement modes. So we can select this here and Control C it, and I'll go back out to locomotion and go into my idle right here. I will alt click and break this connection and paste in my blend node, and then we can use this for default, our idle, and we'll use it for walking and sprinting. But our stunned and our injured poses, we can use the animations that we've got. So I've got my injured idle right here. I want to grab this and make sure I check loop animation. I'll plug that into the injured. And once again, I've forgotten something, guys, which is grabbing a stunned animation from Mixamo. So once again, guys, I'll head to Mixamo, and actually the one I'm looking for, I believe, is Dizzy. Dizzy idle. I'll use this one here. And I'll set the character arm space to 60 once again. Download this one. Those settings are fine. I'll head to my Mixamo animations folder and I'll drag in my Dizzy idle. Leave all of this as default and hit import. Right click this, retarget animations, and I'll select the auto-generated retargeter. Dizzy idle is the one I want to retarget. Hit export. Put these into my Mixamo folder and hit export. And then I've got my Dizzy idle. I'm not even going to bother fixing the feet up on this one, guys. Yeah, sorry once again for the mix-up. It has been a long day. But now that I've got this Dizzy idle, I can drag this in, make sure I check loop animation, and plug this into the stunned pose. And now all of these animations in my idle state and my walk run state will be getting fed into locomotion, which gets called in main states. And main states, I'm also going to cache this pose, new cached pose, call it main states, and I'll call this here, and I'll duplicate this over here because I'm also going to blend my weapon animation out if I'm stunned or injured. So you don't have to do it this way, but it's just going to look nicer as a little showcase of seeing this work. So in my locomotion and my idle, I'll grab my blend node again. I'll head back out to the main part of my anim graph and paste this in. And these are my upper body animations. So I'll use my idle pistol for default walking and sprinting. And for stunned or injured, I'll just feed in my main states animation. And this means that if I'm stunned or injured, my upper body animations will be the same animations as my lower body animations, if that makes any sense. And now that all of these animations have been fed in here, my AC health system here, I'm running set current movement mode to stunned if I shoot the head, and injured if I shoot the left leg or the right leg. Nice. We got there in the end, but this should be working now. This enemy is moving around the map, and I'll wait till they're moving and I'll shoot them in the leg, if I can actually hit the leg, and they are going into the injured movement mode state, like so. Nice. If I shoot them in the head, it should trigger the stunned movement mode. We've got a little bit of sliding there, that's just animation blending. I'm not going to worry about that. But if I can actually hit the head, it's proving more difficult than I anticipated. I'll wait till she's moving. There we go. That's entering the stunned state. And because the stunned state can move as false, it's stopping movement immediately, and her max walk speed is now 0, and she's stopped moving. She's not able to move anymore. But it would not be the same with injured. But because we broke that cycle with can move, she's not going to do the roam at random function again. But once more, guys, have her walking around, shoot the leg, if I can actually hit it, and that has made her enter the injured state, and now her max walk speed, her braking deceleration has changed, and she is in the injured state. Nice. And also with my character, I'm obviously in the walking state, and if I press the left shift, I am running. Very, very nice. And that's it, guys. I know it seems quite complicated, and there's a couple of mix-ups and things I forgot along the way, but we got there in the end. And if this tutorial has been of any use or value to you whatsoever, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.